Riverfront Zoom reading. We're really excited that people are here tonight. And so my job is going to be to introduce our first readers. So we have 2 readers. We will not take an intermission. We'll go from one reader and then someone will introduce the next reader. If you're new to Zoom, I think I've seen a lot of you on Zoom before, but feel free to use your reaction button. You can clap or give the reader a thumbs up, or feel free to jump into the chat and say lovely things about how much you like their poems and encourage the readers. We're really excited to get started tonight. So I have the privilege, our first reader is going to be Gregg Ventello. Gregg Ventello lost his job as an auditor when the firm he worked for became the largest partnership failure in American history. His work has appeared in the Carolina Quarterly, Hotel Amerika, and New Letters. The Schweinehund was recognized as a notable essay in the Best American Essays of 2013. He received a Fulbright Grant to the University of Ryukyus in Okinawa, Japan for the 2014-2015 academic year, and he teaches at Kansas City, Kansas Community College. Welcome, Gregg.
Thank you, Beth Gully, for the introduction, and to Pat Lawson and the Riverfront Committee for the invitation, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm going to read an essay that appears in the current issue of the Chicago Quarterly Review. It's titled Youth Soccer. Hey, Dad, 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 hey, Dad, tie my shoes, tie my shoes, tie my shoes. Where's my shin guards? My water bottle's moldy. Hey, Dad, you pack a snack? One child wears his jersey backwards, the other wipes a shining trail of snot down the sleeve of her hoodie. Little half-moon clots of dirt loosed from cleats glide about the wood floor. A muddled morning's late start, but bottles, balls, boots, and butts assemble in the car. 85 miles per hour, we zoom east via superhighway, then drop sharply south for another 20 minutes until a wind-canted, bullet-peppered speed limit sign cuts the legal limit by 2/3. You snake through the small town, cautiously alert, thinking of the friend who warned you, watch out for Barney Fife down there, because a week earlier, this friend received an exuberant scolding and a costly ticket from the small town cop hidden behind hillock and mirrored sunglasses. The big city has long ebbed away, and soulless ex-urban mansions with slate roofs and copper gutters give way to dilapidated post-war cottages. You can't stop stewing. So much goddamn time and money for children to play soccer. Any appreciation you had for the game is gone. Even though as a young man you enjoyed soccer, played the game as a youngster and straight through to your junior year in college, it took that long to come to your senses, to realize you had nothing more to gain by competing in Division III NAIA soccer, that your time could be better spent and that the moment had come to put away childish things. It wasn't a gradual realization. It struck you suddenly, a mana, an epiphany, while traveling the languorous length of Pennsylvania, returning from an away game. You were feeling slightly ill, having spent your paltry per diem on fast food, and you watched bored college boys engage in harmless shenanigans, precipitated by 4 hours trapped inside a 15-passenger motor pool van. Teammates giggled while one balanced a rotting plum in the open slumbering mouth of another, and scratching your head, you thought, this is a bigger waste of time than a round of golf, a game you're proud to have never pursued seriously, although admittedly you've golfed, but only to learn the game so that you could cash in, making twice as much money as a caddy than as a busboy. And so there you were on the college van, caddy, former busboy, starting defenseman, sweeper to be exact, and the team captain, but you had enough. So the next day you marched into the office of your spineless coach, and against his protest, you told him you were done. You walked away feeling a little like Beyond Board, retiring at the top of his game. At 19 years old, you had better things to do. And yes, part of your decision was a rising dislike for your coach and your teammates, but it was not the result of an aversion to the game. Although now, stuck behind the wheel of an automobile, contempt for everything soccer festers as time is consumed by driving, and more driving. Your impatience expands even though you understand the workings of a child's mind. You can't expect your young children to have the insight you had as a young adult in college. At this point in their lives, your children sincerely believe they will play soccer professionally in the United States. You wind through the small town without seeing the cop. You're relieved not to have encountered Johnny Law, but this is likely because it's Sunday morning. And this fact further antagonizes you as you remember that no one in your childhood home ever would have considered unnecessarily getting in a car on Sunday, the day of rest, except maybe to go to Mass, but then only to meet your religious obligation if you'd missed the abbreviated Twilight Mass the Saturday before. Sundays in October were strictly for watching the Philadelphia Eagles on television and eating broccoli rabe and provolone sandwiches, watching football, eat Italian bitter greens. No other activity was required or expected. At the edge of this small town is a seaside-looking strip mall, complete with decorative fishing nets and cork floats hanging from the windows. Catamarans are for sale in the lot next to a soft-serve ice cream kiosk. Ordinarily, a maritime-themed strip mall wouldn't needle you, but today your simmering anger makes you susceptible. After all, there's no local body of water worth the trouble. The Midwestern state you've relocated to offers atrazine-poisoned rivers and muddied farm ponds. Who buys watercraft 1,400 miles from the ocean? You've entered the twilight zone, but just beyond the city limit is an agricultural sea of winter wheat, the nation's breadbasket along vast fields, low and slung and wavy. The heartland. It calms you a little. By the time you arrive at the soccer field, you've been driving for 1 hour and 25 minutes to deliver your elementary school children to the first of multiple weekly soccer engagements. You peer into the rearview mirror to see your unwitting children sprawled on the back seat, one snoring and drooling, the other's eyes wide against the white glare of a device. You search for parking and begin taking a silent and hateful accounting. Your disdain is not only due to the time and money spent on the sport, but also directed at the destination itself, the soccer complex. It is an excessive 20 full-size artificially turfed fields with adjacent parking to accommodate a culture of people who infrequently walk anywhere, who routinely do nothing without first burning petroleum. This is never more evident than in the parking lot, which requires greater acreage than the 20 soccer fields themselves. Burnished SUVs shine like gems in the white sun and spread out into the horizon. Parents trudge single file, breathing dust and carbon monoxide, barking at children and grandparents. The scene reminds you vaguely of old Woodstock films and photographs of bearded hippies walking along endless lines of cars parked on the side of the road. But the soccer complex has all of the chaos and none of the beads or patchouli or drugs or nakedness of Woodstock. Nor do the soccer parents match the svelte, smiling, inebriated hippies in those old black and whites. Instead, the soccer complex draws parents flaccid from long hours of office work, wearing luminous name-brand athletic clothing purchased from a corporate super warehouse sports emporium. Cellulose and varicose veins are stuffed into Lycra. Collapsible chairs and nylon sacks made in China and picked up at the same warehouse store swing across shoulders and pop the foreheads of howling toddlers. Tote bags are filled with sunblock, plastic liter bottles of water, and nutty protein bars like logs of excrement. Hired coaches imported from soccer-heavy countries speak English with foreign accents: Mexican, Colombian, Brazilian, British, Italian, and one time you swear you detected an Aussie. An over-caffeinated parent, her lips intermittently pursing and sucking on a long, tall paper Starbucks cup, impatiently redirects an arthritic grandparent. Field mom, or field 8, mom, field 8, mom, I said field 8. Grandma keeps her cool as only the elderly can. She quietly replies, yes, I know, dear, but she lifts her walker gingerly, an exaggerated gesture to assure her daughter that grandma understands the gravity of the situation. Arriving late to a child's soccer game is unacceptable. Go to the soccer complex once, and you begin to understand why the drugs and nakedness and free sex at Woodstock were necessary. Yet herds of sober and celibate parents are all too pleased to spend the day watching 9-year-olds buzz around a fluorescent soccer ball like the flies around the fermenting recycling bin. Your fear is that your thoughts will not remain silent and idle odium. This recurrent soccer experience has driven you to complain so much that your good-natured wife went to a local shop to design an overpriced t-shirt for your birthday that reads, I hate youth soccer. It sits atop the graphic of a soccer ball circled with a line through it. And while you understand that the t-shirt is merely comic relief, is there any greater substantive evidence of genuine loathing than the fact that you have written this essay? Obviously, you resent something. Is it really youth soccer? It is. Without a doubt, it is. At least it is whenever smiling soccer organizers delight in presenting themselves as magnanimously interested in instilling healthful lifestyles in your children, along with teaching them the fundamentals of the game. Yet the league's $800 registration fee speaks to less beneficent motives. Other parents tell you you're lucky to pay the $800, that their kids' league costs twice as much, but this fact does nothing to quell your rising animus. Of the children, the men who run these soccer businesses say, with contrived concern, well, you know, Billy, he may have some difficulty competing at the next level if he's not playing now. And there's always a next level, endless levels. And dreamy parents swallow the line early when children are young and delusions of college scholarships are fresh, further softening already docile parents who are all too happy to pay fat fees. And who could challenge such lucrative delusions? Suckers like you, soft-hearted parents who shell out because their children ask for the opportunity to do what their friends are doing? You don't want to hamper with them, do you? You want them to have the same recreational opportunities if they so wish, don't you? You think of your dad, a good man and an excellent father, but had you asked him to pay such a fee for soccer, even adjusted for inflation, he would have laughed. He would have cradled his belly, roared until the tears rolled down his cheeks, and he was forced to sit down. But you didn't need for him to pay an exorbitant fee or to give up wide swaths of his time. You just played and then took the goddamn bus home. Is this the source of the resentment? Could be. Could be a culture that worships children with parents who surrender all of their interests to accommodate their children's whims. Indulgence isn't the word. Obsession is closer. Living vicariously through your children is no longer frowned upon. Today, good parenting requires it. In an essay widely anthologized, Annie Dillard writes of the time as a child when she first saw an amoeba through her toy microscope set up in her basement. Excited, she ran upstairs to her parents and implored them to come down and see it. But they would not, preferring instead to sit at the dinner table to finish their coffee and their cigarettes. Dillard writes, I understood at once that they had their pursuits and I had mine. I had essentially been handed my own life. What parents convey a similar lesson today? At the sound of their child's voice, today's mom and dad would cease talking mid-sentence, leap from the table, bound downstairs, and elbow each other out of the way for a first peek into the microscope, all the while espousing great sickening gobs of praise on a self-important brat. At the soccer complex, you find your field for the day and stand dutifully on the sidelines behind the long row of parents in their sagging vertebra bulging portable chairs. Before the game begins, you see a young enterprising man named Vico, short for Lodovico. Vico's livelihood is soccer. It's a livelihood built upon the combination of being president of this league for 8-year-olds, coaching teenagers at a private high school, coaching a traveling team, and importing athletic wear and equipment from Italy. Vico walks towards you grinning. He and you exchange pleasantries and small talk, and to your surprise, you think you're doing pretty well. Unbeknownst to you, he's gauging you. He's feeling you out, trying to decide whether you've gone off the deep end or worse, whether you're a threat. You realize this after 5 minutes of chit-chat because he smiles nervously and asks, so what's with the t-shirt? You look down. Across your chest, it says, I hate youth soccer. You think, oh shit. In the rush to get out of the house, you hadn't noticed. Or maybe it was subconscious? No matter. You smile back at Vico, think, fuck it, he asked, and then you spit the venom that eventually becomes this essay. Vico nods and listens until he stops listening, his eyes glaze over, and then he does what all other parents do. He spins on his heels and he walks away. Thanks for listening and thank you for indulging me. And please stay tuned. Up next is Victoria Garton. And cheers.
Hello, everyone. Before I will introduce Vicky Garton, I just wanted to mention that our next reading, our next Riverfront Zoom reading will be September 11th at 8 p.m. and it will feature Kevin Rabers, who is a former poet laureate of Kansas, and Al Ortolani, who won a chapbook competition from, what do we call it, Rattle in California, a very well-known publication. So next we have Vicky Garton. Vicky Garton writes poetry as well as nonfiction features for the cattle industry. She lives on a ranch at Nevada, Missouri, and has taught English and literature classes for Crowder College for the past 15 years. A regular contributor at the Phil Miller and Crystal McLean Fields Scholarship Readings, her poetry has been in Thorny Locust, The Same, Quarterly West, and Poem. Nonfiction has appeared in Working Ranch and Missouri Angus Trails. Her book, Kisses in the Raw Night, was published by BkMk Press of UMKC. Sorry. Welcome, Vicky Garton.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to start with a poem that I wrote in response to one of the prompts put out by the Writer's Place. I've appreciated those during this time of sheltering in place, and they gave me some ideas for things to write. The prompt was to write about, from the standpoint of a millionaire who's lost everything and finds himself without possessions. So I called it After Financial Ruin. It is when his feet hit concrete of the hangar-like building where he and the others were herded that he must tell himself again and again that the lush carpet laid just last year is gone, along with the queen-size bed. He lifts himself from the narrow cot, indistinguishable from all the cots of paupers, though now they're called homeless. Homeless. He tries on the word as he waits in line for the toilet. His mind travels room to room in the house he called his. His mind will not accept the humiliation of waiting in a line to relieve himself, to brush the fur from his teeth, to shave. In his mind, he's on a camping trip, has signed on for the minor inconveniences, will savor the primitive. He focuses on trees, hears promises in leaves, paints number by number this new picture of himself. A miniature he'll call an adventure, because the big picture has so many weird shapes to be filled in. He'll live it a little at a time. Meanwhile, he'll wait his turn and not complain like the oaf behind him, who still fashions himself a captain of industry or some such rot. And that After Financial Ruin. The next poem is called Concy's Cows, and I'm going to attempt to do a screen share here. Carl works on that. I'll go to the next poem, and then I'll get back to Concy's Cows. This next one is called Cobwebs on a Dry Lawn. Just when you think there is no reprieve for grass drying in the yard, inches of sunlight catch on wind-driven webs, and the lawn becomes alive with movement. Just beyond the cat's mill, weaving their own celebration of morning. They are easy with the Lilliputian energy of spiders, the filaments shimmering, binding one grass stem to another, holding it all in place, gravity's work, securing the mass. We small creatures send monofilament prayers of hope. Luminous to we few who sit in a certain slant of light, meditating on frisky wind, on stunning silence. A virus rages, and yet we pray the inevitable can be reversed, death's ties broken. We walk to the garden of wilted tomato vines as the sun ascends, as silvery webs holding us to this earth vanish, and morning routine offers an anchor. And that one was Cobwebs on a Dry Lawn. I'll go down. Lisa, I've got your picture up because this next poem is for you. Lisa Stewart just published a wonderful book, The Big Quiet, about her horseback ride for a month. And if you haven't read it, you certainly need to get it and read it. My poem is called Horsefly. And Lisa, I noticed that you mentioned those a time or two in your book. On the window screen near the top, a horsefly basks in sunlight, extracting salt and protein from blood of the still tingling horse. Alone or with sisters, she drills through hair, extracts like a miner what is precious to herself and victim, and rises in a loop-de-loop as if lassoing a bit of sky. How efficiently she flies her single ambition, and avoiding dark and shady places, sits exposed but unmoved, producing eggs and more eggs. Barefoot and pregnant with dreams of world domination, she is the buzz of the day. Like her cousin the armadillo, she comes with coat of hinged armor, a marauding invader. She slams into windows to flop and flail like some out-of-season snow angel. On her back, she's a dog beaten and submissive, an easy kill. Even in death, she is not pretty. Eggs spread like a losing hand of cards. Mid-morning, I go out to curry the horse, brush away dead hair, sand and detritus. On the road, a trucker honks. In the sky, a small plane, crop duster, loop-de-loops, lassoing a bit of heaven. Ritual bound as a priest, I apply the spray as if sprinkling holy water. There will be deaths of small vectors, but the horseflies, the black, the smaller green ones, I must kill with a quick slap. Their blood, the stolen blood, spreads over my hand, squishes through fingers, justifiable homicide, as anthrax and swamp fever inundate the cows and horses. How beautiful and accusing the bloom of blood. And that one was called Horsefly. Okay, I'm going to try again to screen share. And this one is called Concy's Cows. I bought this painting from Concy Dennison a number of years ago, and I wrote this poem about it. I live with cows, those outside my windows for practical purposes, and those in Concy Dennison's painting for art. The front cow stands so close, her legs are cut by the frame. So she floats in a field of burnt yellow over a wash of green, as if August heat had made spring grass a memory. The cow faces east, but watches the viewer with her left eye, her head slightly lowered. If she were in the pasture outside my window, she would begin to graze, what cows like to do. The second cow in Concy's art looks west, but with her right eye, watches to see what the viewer will do. Cows are like that, docile and waiting for instruction. Her face catches the light. It is the third cow that concerns me. She looks back at those in the distance and has her head up, ready to bolt. Unlike the polled cows outside my window, she lifts curled horns out of the painting. If I ruminate, they become the bottom of a halo, a slightly squashed one. But that's where reality and art take a junction. Go one way and paint in black, blue, orange, or yellow creates cowness. Go another, and the plaintive mooing of a mother of a lost calf causes all the cows to lift heads, ready to bolt. Concy's cows never stampede. And once again, that is Concy's Cows. And I'll then go to a poem called Aloneness. Loneliness and aloneness. And this is kind of a compare and contrast of these two conditions. I'll start with loneliness. Like barbed wire fences, marriage holds it in. Shared grief, the logic of parties. It is the smell of rubber burning as tires howl on a deserted road. What the statue sees, the statue with marble sheen where eyes have been, the grain of lament in a silent violin, the ache in late afternoon as rain clouds move on and the day's busyness like chatter of birds drops away. What if it's nemesis, or is acquaintance a better word? That savory soup of soul and silence, that scent of pajamas in a single bed, the crumble of earth in childhood sanctuary, the kinship of earthworm burrowing, not out of fear, but pleasure, the singleness of a silver tree, the leafless and happy in the sunlight. Can loneliness and aloneness make peace? Would we want them to? And once again, that's loneliness and aloneness. This one is called intensity, and I was thinking about how does one enter or occupy or return to a state where everything matters intensely? And so that was kind of the question I started with. Where is that door to intensity? Is it in death rattling each breath? Don't tell the bereaved, but the tension between breaths grows stagnant. And nostalgia is mellow, not intense, for it sugarcoats truth. Truth is in the salt we licked from arms, salt and sweat, and a night of June bugs sluggish in the dog's pail, unworthy suitors, as were the obsequious moths fawning in the light left on to guide us home. But the urgent need for interrupted by Reese scratching at the door. During the day when we are with family, the cat, who stretches lazily in our presence, races across the wide hardwood planks which might have aligned with the flat world in the 1700s, but now slope having settled with the settling earth, and hits one of the many rag rugs we find bunched under furniture on our return. Oreo, the black and white rabbit, examines us with large fluid eyes, munches the food we put out, and hops to the parlor, hoping Reese has dislodged the foot-tall board that keeps Oreo from a second snack of wires leading from plug to Christmas tree. This history of pet misdeeds we know from the note left by the 12-year-old daughter. She forgot to mention that sometimes shut doors go slightly ajar and pets descend into the cavern-like basement, which may be haunted. We found Reese there, but Oreo was in the kitchen all along at the back of the firewood hole. The two turtles in the aquarium under the window mount each other, but otherwise feel no obligation to entertain. In the yard between the city hall and church with tall New England steeple are the chickens. They ruffle feathers and peck at the bits of cracked corn my husband puts out for them each morning when he breaks the ice lid of their water bucket. Not laying eggs this time of year, they exist for their image, like William Carlos Williams' chickens. I'd like to say, so much depends upon, but there is no wheelbarrow, and the chickens are speckled, not white. And it's the time of year for snow, not rain. So that was Christmas in a Stranger's House. The next poem, I'm going to try once again to pick up a picture. the Writers Place has a promotion going on right now, I guess, or a fundraiser, and it's called Tribe Your Jibe. And this poem and this picture photograph I'm doing for my project for that. The poem is called Old Lady Picking Strange Fruit, and hopefully you can see the picture of the tree and the two trees, the wild cherry and the cedar. The striped dress shirt looks best with a necktie, but the old lady leaves it open at the neck, rolls the cuffs one turn so as not to encumber her hands, reaching for the conical shapes, the cornucopias of dried cedar. She rolls like an old man rolling a smoke, squeezes until a squirt of green shoots out. The bagworms have decorated the little cedar tree for Christmas in July, and the old lady picked those on low branches, the ones she could reach from the ground. But the worms in their upside-down teepees moved higher, munching until the upper branches and top grew bare, except for strange and strangulating fruit. She backs a small RTV against the trunk of a wild cherry, steps on the bar by the fender, and swings herself like a younger woman up and into the small bed. The cedar grew from a small sprout in the fork of the wild cherry years before, a symbiosis of cedar and cherry putting out green, harmoniously living together. Or so she thought. Wasn't that the way of relationships? Now the dead cherry is nothing but structure and architecture upon which the cedar was built, like she's built on the old man who once wore the striped shirt on Sundays with a tie. Life now gone out of him, but there still, watching for time and wind to bring him down, strange fruit grown from this bond called love. Okay, and and for my last poem, this is a coronavirus poem. I tried to use a little bit of, I don't know, maybe morbid humor. I hope it works. It's called Pals at the Boarding House. Since the coronavirus has come, other undesirables have moved in. A guy with a Samsonite suitcase, red and brown, with hard sides, picked up at some thrift store and last used in 1967, took the stuffy attic room. There he lurks like the archangel, spotting prey. His buddy on the first floor makes introductions with stomach flu, messes up noses, which in this boarding house is a blessing, and that dry smoker's cough so many of the boarders already have. Those two run quite a scam, putting the fear of God in many. The attic man must have had a telescoping handle on his scythe, brought it in the suitcase. From the number he's gathered, a machine gun in a violin case would have been more efficient. Some never give up the old ways, and a scythe cuts a broad path. We're all ready for those two to move on, try another planet. Up close, coronavirus looks like something that could take orbit. As for death, we've been trying to evict him for eons. That's one tough character who's never kept his distance. And once again, that was Pals at the Boarding House. And I thank you, everyone who tuned in. It looks to me when I go to gallery view like looks like we've had a wonderful turnout, and thank you so much for your attendance.
Everyone, let's give a round of applause. Unmute and let's give a round of applause to our readers, Gregg and Vicky. Thank you for your readings. We really enjoyed them.